Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video, and today Harley-Davidson announced 4 new bikes for the 2024 model year, including a new Road Glide and Street Glide, as well as 2 new additions to their super premium CVO lineup. So in this video, we'll go through all of the details with absolutely everything that you need to know. Now first up, we've got the new Road Glide and Street Glide, a pair of bikes that are fundamentally pretty similar, but the key difference is that one has a frame-mounted fairing, and that's the Road Glide, and the other has a fork-mounted fairing, and that's the Street Glide. For this year, both now get the 117 cubic inch version of their Milwaukee 8V twin, and so that's 3 cubic inches up on the 114 version that was found in last year's model. Now, quick look at the specs, and that 114 version makes 86 horsepower peak and 148 newton meters of peak torque. And while I don't have the specific figures for these exact 2024 road and street glides, other bikes that use the 117 engine, like the Lowrider ST for example, well, with those you get 103 horsepower, so that's nearly 20 more, and 169 newton meters of peak torque, so that's another 21. So that really is quite a significant step up for these bikes, and I'm expecting them to feel a lot more punchy out on the road. Now, apart from the extra capacity, one of the other things that they've done to achieve that is an improved cooling system, and they say it increases intake and exhaust flow, but also it has a positive secondary effect on comfort in that it helps keep the rider cool. Now, a lot of this stuff seems to trickle down from the CVO versions of these bikes from last year. CVO meaning, for the uninitiated, Custom Vehicle Operations, which is effectively their performance division that offers the highest spec, most luxurious finished versions of their bikes. Think the M division for BMW or TFC for Triumph. So look, another feature that they inherit is the riding modes. They now get 4, and so there's road, sport, rain, and custom. And through that custom mode, I'd imagine you'll be able to define your own settings for things like throttle response or power and traction control. All of this is managed through a fantastic 12-inch TFT display, which uses their new Skyline operating system. And I was actually lucky enough to test out one of the CVOs last year, and I've got to say, this new display, in terms of how it affects the riding experience and the way that you interact with the bike, I think it's one of the standout features. I mean, mainly because it's really pretty huge, so you've got so much screen space, but also it's nicely laid out, it's easy to navigate, and I think it gives a cool look to the cockpit of these bikes. The only dash that I can think of that's even similar is the 10-inch display that you get on some BMWs, like their R18 Transcontinental or the R1250 RT, but I think this dash from Harley-Davidson even has the edge on those. Now, of course, it's a full infotainment system, so there's phone connectivity which you can hook up to handle phone calls or your favorite music or even your favorite podcasts. And while we don't have a sponsor for this particular video, I'd just like to give a shout out to our own podcast, which you can find linked to down in the description below. Now, you can hook up a Bluetooth headset, of course, to listen to your favorite tunes or the Full Tank Motorcycle podcast, but if you just want to blast it out into the fresh air, then there's a new 200 watt audio amp linked to a pair of fairing mounted speakers up in the cockpit. Speaking of this fairing, actually, that's another thing that trickles down from the CVOs from last year, and so there really is a very distinctive front end to these bikes with a much more modern aesthetic than the road and street glides of the past. Personally, I quite like this new LED lighting, but also beyond the superficial stuff, they say that wind tunnel research has actually allowed them to reduce buffeting by about 60%, so they should be much more comfortable if you're doing a lot of motorway work. On top of all that, there's also more travel on the rear suspension, so it's now up to 76 millimeters, and you now get a one-piece saddle with revised materials and padding inside, and so both those things should contribute to making it a little more cushy and comfy than before. As for the colors, well, there'll be a choice of base paint schemes as well as some premium options, and on top of that you can choose from chrome on the hardware or a black finish. And so the prices for the Street Glide range from £26,795 to £29,095 depending on which combination of finishes you choose, whereas the Road Glide is a little more at £27,295 to £29,595, but despite that, I think it's the one I'd go for just for the lighter steering owing to that frame-mounted fairing. But as always, I'd love to know which bike you'd pick, so let me know down in the comments below. Now, on top of these standard models, there's also a new CVO edition of the Road Glide, and this time it gets an ST suffix because it's had a bit of a bump in performance. You see, although it is the same 121 cubic inch version of the Milwaukee 8, new for this year they've developed an HO edition, which stands for high output. And so whereas the regular 121 makes 115 horsepower peak and 189 newton meters of torque, this HO version makes 127 horsepower, so that's 12 more, and also 193 newton meters of peak torque, so that's an extra 4. Now they actually say that this is the most power and torque ever from a factory installed Harley-Davidson engine, although I think they must be forgetting their own Revolution Max that they use in the Pan America, for example, because that makes about 150 horsepower. Still, I think they're probably right on the torque because 193 newton meters is pretty monstrous and not that far off the most torquey engine available on the market, which is the Triumph Rocket 3. That makes 221 newton meters from its 2.5 litre inline triple. Still, if that extra punch wasn't enough already, then they've also fitted a lower final drive ratio, so you should get a little bit more snap under acceleration, and they've actually managed to shed quite a bit of weight, which will only further increase its power to weight ratio. So it's now down to 363 kilograms dry, which admittedly is still a lot of heft for a motorcycle, as is typical of this style of bike from Harley, but it is 12 kilograms down on the previous CVO Road Glide, and they've done that with all sorts of changes. So there's a titanium exhaust with a carbon end cap, carbon bodywork on the mudguard, on the seat cowl and the tank console, a lighter oil pan, lighter wheels and wavy discs as well, which they say help. And so I guess it's the sum of a lot of little different changes, and 12 kilograms, to be fair, isn't to be sniffed at. Now the chassis on these CVO models is a little bit more sporty versus those standard bikes, and so you get a Showa fully adjustable upside down fork up front, which is nice and chunky, and also there's a fully adjustable remote reservoir shock at the rear too, which is also provided by Showa. Braking comes from Brembo with a pair of 4-piston radially mounted calipers up front, and so there should be plenty of stopping power. And like the standard models, you get a bunch of different riding modes, but this time there's a difference. You see, you get a track and a Track Plus mode, and also I think a couple more custom slots. Now it might not seem like a bike that you'd first think of when you imagine yourself out on a track day, especially when you consider the price, which we'll get onto in a moment. But thing is, it's influenced by the King of the Baggers race series, which has grown increasingly popular, or at least visible, over recent years. And so I think that inspires these sort of sporty features on quite an unlikely behemoth like this. In the cockpit, we've also got the same infotainment system, which I like so much, but this time the audio amp is 500 watts, so you can really piss people off, and that's hooked up to a pair of Rockford Fosgate design speakers, which should give you a little bit more audio quality. As for the paint jobs, well, we're looking at golden white pearl or raven metallic, and both get a King of the Baggers inspired Screaming Eagle logo on the side, as well as a CVO 25th anniversary logo too. Now, the price, as I say, is somewhat steep. It's £38,995 in the UK. And look, while that is a heck of a lot of money, it's actually not dissimilar from the CVO bikes of last year. And so given that there are quite a lot of enhancements for 2024, relative to what came before it, it doesn't look too bad, although relative to like any other bike, it does look pretty spendy. But look, on top of all that, we've also got a brand new addition to the CVO lineup, and that comes in the form of their Pan America adventure bike. Now with CVO, they often get a little bit of a performance boost as well as some extra tech. So sometimes it will be a better TFT display or infotainment system like the speakers that we just talked about and the amplifier. And sometimes it will be things like an inertial measurement unit that sends lean angle into the rider aids to give you even more advanced safety features. But the thing is, with the Pan America, it already had a lot of this stuff as standard, and so this bike is really more of a paint job and fully accessorized version than any fundamental changes under the hood, so to speak. They say the CVO Pan America model is outfitted with a whole host of rugged accessories selected to enhance the journey, including adaptive ride height suspension, rugged aluminium top and side cases, a Screaming Eagle quick shifter, tubeless laced wheels, auxiliary LED forward lighting, and an aluminium skid plate, providing excellent value to the adventure rider who wants it all and more. The price for this one comes in at £23,495, and while they do claim that it is going to be good value for money and sort of package up some of those features, it seems to me like quite a big premium over the 16 or 17k that you'll pay for a standard Pan America or the Pan America Special. So look, it might be tempting just to buy one of those bikes and use the cash difference to spec it up exactly how you want, although it has to be said that striking new paint job on the CVO version does make it stand apart from those other two Pan Americas, which are generally a lot more muted in terms of the paint options. As always though, I'd love to know what you think of the bike, so do let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you want to see my full review of the Pan America that I shot a couple of years back, then I'll put it on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch if you haven't seen it already. Do hit subscribe if you haven't already to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next video.